If it's Friday, who will control Congress? We promised you election week. Are we going to deliver election month? The balance of power in both chambers still too close to call. Ballot counting in key states drags into day 4. Plus, more Republicans are now blaming Trump for the GOP's disappointing election returns, saying it's time for the party to move on and look forward. Trump has other ideas and is poised to announce his nomination for president, whether the party likes it or not. And Russian forces in retreat. The Ukrainian counteroffensive forces Putin to withdraw from a key city. Could it be a potential turning point in this war before winter sets in? Well, happy Friday and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd. We still do not know which party will control either the House or the Senate come January 3rd, but we have gotten some new clarity on where things stand, so let's dive right in. At this hour, we are down to 26 uncalled House races, and despite what most thought heading into election week, there is still a plausible path for Democrats to hold on to the House. We're going to dig into that in a moment. In the uncalled Senate races, our decision desk can now characterize Nevada officially as too close to call. The Republican candidate leads right now by just a percentage point. This is a live look inside one of the tabulation rooms in the state's second largest county, Washoe, where the vote has been neck and neck. Moving over to Arizona's uncalled Senate race, and really all of the statewide races are uncalled there still. Incumbent Democratic Senator Mark Kelly still leads Blake Masters by over 100,000 votes. His lead is notably larger than the Democrats' gubernatorial nominee, Katie Hobbs, who is only leading Kari Lake by a much smaller margin there. Vote tabulations are continuing at this hour. Here's a look inside Pima County, where Tucson is located. And we hope to see some more tranches of vote out of Arizona later today. And it is one of those cases where, at least in the Senate race or the Secretary of State race, let's see what kind of ballots come in. But if we see some of the Election Day ballot returns and some of these margins don't really change, those are the two races most likely that are on the precipice of being called. If either party, of course, wins both Arizona and Nevada, it locks up Senate control without the need of a Georgia runoff. And at this moment, Democrats think they have a shot at pulling off that math. With a conceivable path for Democrats to maintain control of both the House and the Senate, we're going to see more Republican hand-wringing, and we already are seeing it over former President Trump's drag on the party in these elections. Michigan Republicans delivered a scathing election postmortem on Trump-backed candidates, according to the Detroit Free Press, pinning some of the party's statewide losses on the former president's brand. And Virginia Republican Lieutenant Governor, one-time outspoken Trump supporter and Trump surrogate during the 2020 campaign, Winsome Sears, she was just as blunt with her assessment of the returns.
The voters have spoken, and they have said that they want a different leader. And a true leader understands when they have become a liability. A true leader understands that it's time to step off the stage, and the voters have given us that very clear message. We have a clear mission, and it is time to move on.
But Trump is plowing ahead with an expected presidential announcement on Tuesday, believe it or not. And not surprisingly, he's lashing out at potential GOP presidential rivals, including Governors Ron DeSantis and Glenn Youngkin. And it's not just Trump who's under the microscope in the aftermath of Election Day. Several prominent Senate Republicans, not just folks that are always sort of thorns in McConnell's side, but some other names, are calling for a delay in leadership elections, with Mitch McConnell running for another term as majority leader, or Republican leader, excuse me. And Trump allies say that they need to hear more from Kevin McCarthy and other House Republican leaders about Trump 2024 if they want their support. Needless to say, things are messy inside the Republican Party right now, because House and Senate control is still undecided. So let's head over to a big board. We're going to take a look at where things stand. We're going to start with actually the Democratic Party's more plausible but improbable path to the House majority. Okay, here we are. You have 26 uncalled races. Let me show you where they are right now, and I'm going to give you a little tour. Right now, Democrats obviously need to win 20 of the 26. Right now, Republicans lead in 10 of those 26, so a little simple math there. Obviously, 16 where the Democrats hold the lead right now. So the question is, let's assume everything stays as is. Where can they find their 4? Let's look at the different places where Republicans currently lead in the House. If I don't talk about your race, it means the Democrats currently have the lead in that race, or that we expected. So let's look at Arizona 6. This is one. It's very tight, 5,500, just 82% in. And late ballots, what are they going to do? This is something that I think this one is on the edge. Democrats have to find 4 of the following 10 races I'm going to give you a tour of. So here's Arizona 6. I think it's certainly on the map, on the radar, as something that they could pull off. California 3, I'm a little less convinced of here. Only barely, not even half the vote is in yet. But this is one you have to assume Republicans hang on there. So I would probably not include this. Here's another one, California 13. This one's a bit closer, 267 votes, but we only have 44% in. Again, a little early to tell if that's one that actually has a shot. California 22 here, this is David Valadao. I'm skeptical that Valadao is going to get knocked off. I don't think they had a Democratic turnout that could pull that off. So I don't include that as a potential of one of the 6. Mike Garcia, remember, he won a special election to replace a Democrat that had to resign. Let's see what happens there. I'm also skeptical that that's one that Democrats could flip with a late count. Now, this one, I'm less, we'll see. Ken Calvert, he's been in this position before. This is one that I think's on the radar, where if you told me Democrats won this by 10 votes, it wouldn't shock me. I think it's one we'll have to wait for all the ballots to be counted. Let me take you to California 45, where Michelle Steele was. This is another one where I think she's not going to get caught. And this is one, if Democrats come up short and it's these California races, there's going to be a little people whispering about Gavin Newsom and asking if he could have done more. Colorado 3 is the big surprise here. Are we going to have to wait for military ballots to tell us who won that one? We might, but I think that's on the radar as their path to do that. And then there's Oregon 5, which everything else in Oregon has come up short for the Republicans. This is their best shot at a pickup here, but there's still a lot of vote out. Like I said, Democrats seem to have a little late momentum. Let's see what happens there. So that's on their path. So, look, and then there's New York 22. You have to assume if every other New York race tipped Republican, that this one will likely stay that way as well. But this one was not near the New York City suburbs. So if you told me Democrats did slightly better here, okay, this is where Hochul was certainly trying to drive up her own turnout. So it could be on the map. So look, the path is plausible. It's not a crazy way for the Democrats to get there, but it's a combination of picking up that one Arizona seat, definitely, I think, Oregon and New York. So there's 3. And then they need one more. One of those California races and Ann Lowen Boebert. So again, they could see the path. I don't know if they're going to get there, but it is not out of the question. Let's get the latest on some of these vote counts, starting with Gary Grumbach. He is in Las Vegas, and I'll bring up some of our Nevada numbers here for you to look at while we go there. And Vaughn Hilliard is on the ground in Arizona. We'll get to him in a moment. But Gary, I am hearing that we may be done with Clark County counting by the end of tomorrow. Are you able to confirm that?
Well, they have to be. That's the Nevada statute. And so they really have no choice in that matter. But I do have some new numbers to update you on when it comes to this. 50,000 mail ballots are still to be counted here in Clark County. 15,900 of those 50,000 are in tabulation right now. So we will be getting those numbers later this evening. We're told around 6 p.m. Pacific time. And 34,000 of that 50,000 are being worked on by what's called a counting board. As a result of those ballots are expected both tonight and tomorrow. So by tomorrow night, we should be done with the majority of the counting here in Clark County. I also have an update for you on Washoe County. Chuck, this just came in moments ago. We're told 20,000 mail ballots are still to be counted in Washoe. We don't have a breakdown of when they're going to be announced, but we are told there will be an announcement by tonight on some of those ballots. But right. If you're looking at how much of the vote so far has broken towards Catherine Cortez Masto, it's about 60% of each batch that we get is going towards Catherine Cortez Masto. And our decision desk at NBC and other news networks, they like to see trends before they call a race. And this is certainly what we've been seeing, a trending towards the Democrats. She's down about 8,000 votes in Nevada right now.
Gary, stick with me here. I'm taking people through the map. We estimate there's might be as many as 100,000 more votes to count. So listen to those spreads that he was telling you. I think that is significant here. That's what we're estimating. I also want to point out, how important have these mail ballots been, and the fact that these counts have come in late and have been advantaged Democrats. At this time yesterday, Gary, Washoe was still red on our board because Laxalt was still winning in Washoe. Clearly, the ballots that have come in have favored her because she has pulled the lead. And as I told you yesterday, if a Democrat wasn't going to carry Washoe, I don't know how they were going to win statewide. So this is how you get there. And for what it's worth, the governor's race is also he's just like barely. He's only headed by 390. But you can see, I still don't know if there's a path for Sisolak to overtake Lombardo, but you can see why so many Democrats believe that there is a chance there. All right, Gary, we'll see tomorrow. Any other places that we're not thinking? Have you heard from the Laxalt campaign? Have they said, hey, don't just assume X and Y here?
I think don't just assume X and Y, but what's interesting here is sort of the provisional ballots that are also out there and some of the uncured ballots. We're talking about almost 20,000 when it comes to provisional and uncured. Now, of course, not all of those are going to be able to be counted because if you're one of the 9,000 people in Clark County that needs your ballot cured right now and you don't talk to Clark County and get that done before Monday, your ballot will not be counted. And I think that's a really important thing to stress, that if you live in Clark County and you're watching this and you've gotten a notice that you need to cure your ballot, contact the county and make that happen.
Remember, every vote counts, especially in battleground states. Anyway, Gary Grumbach on the ground for us in Las Vegas. Gary, thank you. I'm going to get to Vaughn Hilliard momentarily. He's doing some reporting, may have some new news for us when we get him back. Because as I mentioned at the top of the hour, we are going to get some more vote out of Arizona, and particularly some important same-day ballot drop-off vote. This is the vote that Kari Lake thinks will put her over the top, or at least give her the lead as we keep counting these ballots. But as we wait for Vaughn, I want to get to my next guest. Many inside the Republican Party are now beginning, at least again, to think about reassessing their relationship with former President Trump. Joining me now is someone who has some thoughts on the future of the GOP and perhaps might have an I told you so moment here. It's former Texas Republican Congressman Will Hurd. Congressman, it is good to see you. Let me just start with this. What did you see in the midterms, and what did you expect to see with the midterms?
Well, first off, what did I see? You've already said it. Every vote counts. I hope America and all of your listeners are recognizing that. And by the way, ticket splitting actually happens. I think one of the things that's fascinating for me is when you look at a place like Ohio, Governor DeWine won by 23 points. And the Senate candidate J.D. Vance only won by, I think it's at about 7 now. Had Governor DeWine not had that lead, you wouldn't have seen that happen. And I think the fact that we're 3 days after the elections and we're starting to have conversations about, are Republicans going to actually take the House back, is pretty shocking. And at the same time, the far right within the Republican conference is trying to hold up the presumptive speaker if Republicans do take back the House. It's just wild to me, and they need to learn new tactics. And we need to start talking about how do we govern, how do we solve problems, and not just throw bombs.
Congressman, it's not hard to see the pattern here. The closer you were to Donald Trump, the worse you did in this election. The further you were away, if you were a Republican, I look at Brian Kemp as the model, right? He slayed the Trump dragon, and he's the highest vote getter in the state of Georgia. Do more Republicans, do you think they'll see that, or do you think the fact that Trump does have this influence in a primary, although Kemp showed it's harder against incumbents, maybe incumbents have extra advantages there, that fear of the Trump wing in a primary is still going to scare off some Republicans from taking on Trump here?
Well, I think people are starting to realize the Trump burden is real. This is a thing. It's hurt people. It's pretty obvious in this race. Look, there's the race in Washington State. My friend Jamie Herrera Butler had held that seat for 10 years.
It's a Republican seat, Will.
It's a Republican seat.
Yeah, this is a Romney, Trump. Every Republican presidential candidate carries it.
Absolutely, and the fact that it may lose, and I don't know if the seat has been called yet. So this is the example of how this Trump burden is real, and the reality. And look, we have to get through. Let's say, based on y'all's projections, that Republicans have 220 in the House. And you have people in the Freedom Caucus saying that they're not going to support Kevin McCarthy. What happens if Democrats come around and have 216 votes, and they try to get some Republican to jump ship and support someone? We have to remember, you do not have to be a member of the House of Representatives to be Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, that's implausible, but I know that there are Dems that are thinking about this, depending on whether Kevin is able to get his ducks in a row. But the bottom line is this: I think when we're going to see the final votes tallied, we might get close to 2018 numbers in turnout. Right. But guess what? It's still less than 50% of the population. That means 50% of the population didn't care what happened on Tuesday. They're not following what's happening now like it's sports. And we need to make sure that we have leaders that are trying to inspire the entire country, not just fear-mongering to a small percentage of the Republican primary base. Right. That's the opportunity. And if we realize that, we can see growth down the line.
You know, your former colleague, Carlos Curbelo, made this point to me the other night. He said, you know, when John Boehner got forced out, there were 245 House Republicans. Mm-hmm. So he didn't have the votes to remain as Speaker when there were 245. So I buy this idea that McCarthy may not have the votes, but who would?
Look, it's a good question. You have to go through this process to figure it out. I think Jim Jordan is looking and trying to see, can he tabulate the votes. I think a lot of people don't want the position because they recognize how difficult it would be to govern in such a small minority. And look, the president made it very clear. He thinks that the solution here is that the American people said, hey, we need to work together and solve problems. But we got some big issues coming up. We still got to fund the government. That runs out by December 16th. You have an issue of a debt ceiling, and that's going to happen, no later than Q2 of next year. We still have a crisis at the border. We're dealing with our adversaries like the Chinese government. We're dealing with cyber terrorism and cyber crime. There was a major hack announced earlier today or yesterday afternoon. So we have a lot of serious problems that we have to deal with, and that's what the American public wants us to do. And now it's time for serious people to step up and say, hey, let's solve problems and stop resorting to tactics that actually give the other side. Like the problem with the Freedom Caucus and some of the far right, their tactics are actually giving power to the people they're saying that they're trying to stop.
Look, Donald Trump's forcing this issue. What's in the best interest of the party would be Donald Trump to postpone this, but we know that it's just not how he rolls. We can all wish cast all we want. He's not going to do it. So do you just hope it peters out? Do you hope that maybe that he can't fill an arena and as he gets audience levels of 2,000 and 3,000, that sends the message? Because the voters have been, his grassroots following is what has kept the establishment from totally throwing him overboard. Is that what's going to have to be shown before the leadership truly throws him overboard?
Look, the campaigns and elections are simple. ID your voters, turn them out. And prior to Tuesday's election, the president probably had about 30% of the Republican Party kind of hardcore that were willing to vote for him. Does that change? When you have a candidate that comes along and is talking about solving the problems of the future, but also dealing with the issues that we have in front of us right now, like inflation and crime and the border, when there's someone that talks that way and is willing to try to grow the party, look, we got to make sure the Republican Party looks like America. We got to make sure that all of America is looking for the Republican Party. When we do that, we can be successful. But if we're losing the young vote by losing it by about 70% to the Democrats, we're never going to be successful. So yes, it's going to require, Donald Trump's not going to go away quietly, and it's going to require someone that's willing to stand up and try to encourage others to come out to vote.
Yep. At the end of the day, if you want to get rid of them, you're going to have to beat them. Former Congressman Will Hurd from Texas, always good to get your perspective. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Up next, we're going to get the latest on the ground in Arizona, plus the changing political landscape after these elections, and what it means, forget 2024, what it means for the rest of 2022 and 2023. But before we go to break, it's Veterans Day in America, and we want to take a moment to honor those who serve. I want to thank them for their service. Here's a look at how some are paying tribute to the nation's service member this Veterans Day. Here's pictures from Knoxville, Tennessee, New York, Pawtucket, Dallas. Thousands took to the streets to honor and celebrate America's veterans for their service and sacrifice. You're watching Meet the Press Now. All right, as we mentioned, we are awaiting another tranche of votes to come in from Arizona. I want to go to Vaughn Hilliard because Vaughn lived in Arizona, knows Arizona, and he knows the intricacies of what day, what ballot drops, and what ballot drops are Election Day ballot drops and all of that. So, Vaughn, tell me what we don't know and tell me what we're going to know by the end of the night. And we just lost. We had him there for a second, as you can see. I assume we will redial him in. Let me bring in the panel. USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page, Maria Teresa Kumar is the President and CEO of Voto Latino, and I've got Republican strategist Matt Gorman to the control room. The minute we get Vaughn Hilliard, I do want to bring him in. Good. Vaughn, I was able to get my panel introduced. Okay, I will shut up. Tell me what you know and tell me what we're going to know by the end of the night.
As much as whether we know we're live or not. How about that, Chuck?
We know we're live.
Look, there's 17,000 ballots. There's 17,000 ballots that we do expect to come tonight, that those are going to be Republican leaning. Those are the ballots that were initially rejected, you'll recall, on Tuesday by those tabulation machines, which caused much uproar at the time. We expect a great number of those, if not all of them, to be dropped here tonight. But then there's the 30 to 40,000 other ballots. Those were Saturday through Monday early ballots that are definitely going to trend towards the Democrats, towards Mark Kelly and Katie Hobbs. We are anticipating those to drop tonight. And then that's when we get the consequential mail ballots that were hand-delivered to the polling locations on Tuesday. These are the ones we've been waiting for. We were hoping for them, frankly, yesterday. We're hoping for a good number tonight. We don't know exactly how many are going to come tonight, but they could give us that indication of whether Blake Masters has a shot to catch up with Mark Kelly and whether Kari Lake is going to have any shot to pass Katie Hobbs here. Those ballots in 2018 went in the direction of Kyrsten Sinema. In 2020, they went in the direction of Trump. Republicans are anticipating that to be the case again this year, especially because there were 100,000 more folks that did this, had ballots mailed to their home, hand-delivered them, and they believe those are folks who were skeptical of the mail system after 2020, and that is where they're hoping that they're still in the ballgame for the Senate seat, and they will be able to put a nail in the coffin in the governor's race.
Look, the Senate race is in one place, and perhaps that's something, if we get a little more insight on those Election Day ballot drops, we feel like we might be able to say something. But I don't think we'll ever get there in the gov race until we count all the ballots. So let me ask you this, Vaughn. When are we going to be done with all the ballots?
Let's see here. About 62,000 came out 2 nights ago, about 75,000 last night. And then if we've got about 340,000 left, then I'm looking at, what is that, guys? 5-6 days?
Yeah.
5-6 days here in Maricopa County? How about that for some quick math?
No, that's pretty good. And that was what I assumed it would be mid to late next week. And what you're saying is we may not know the governor's result till mid to late next week.
And we've still got the Attorney General's race. We've got the Mark Fincham Secretary of State race. We got the state legislative races here.
And
there's a lot of folks here in the state
Arizona 1 and Arizona 6, which both will matter.
And the congressional races, Chuck.
Count up to 218. All right, Vaughn Hilliard, go back to counting. Thank you, sir. All right, let's get to the panel. What happens to the Georgia runoff if the Democrats are already at 50 Senate seats?
It's going to be fiercely contested no matter what. You'd much rather have 51 than 50, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're Republicans, you'd much rather have 50 than 49. So I don't think it takes some of the pressure off because you know who's going to have control. But there's no way that's not going to be incredibly hard fought by both sides. Every weapon that either side can use is going to get used.
Matt, this is what I've heard, though, quietly from Republicans. A lot easier to get them to overlook some of the Walker issues if it's for Senate control.
Oh, absolutely.
Might be a little harder to get some of these voters out.
Absolutely. Okay. And I would say if this were reversed, I would say the same thing about the Democrats.
That if this isn't for control, it may be harder for you to get.
Absolutely, right? And I think to that point as well, you're going to see a lot of possible 2024 contenders doing a little star turn down in Georgia, testing it out, seeing how they're received. So in a way, there's some selfish motives for some folks that are going to go down there as well. But yeah, that will be certainly a difference, 49 versus 50.
Yeah. Maria Teresa, it's funny, and I want to give you a minute here to talk about the Hispanic vote, because there's some people are going to look at Florida and say one thing. But then if you look at South Texas, you look at Arizona, you look at Nevada, I mean, it does seem like it really depends on the state. And it's a reminder that this is not monolithic, right?
Well, and it goes back to the conversations you and I have had. Florida is a very different place. But a fun fact for all your viewers is that Florida is the only state where young Latino voters will never eclipse older voters. But you know where they eclipse older voters in the Latino community? In Texas, in Georgia, in Nevada, in Arizona,
even in Arizona,
in Colorado.
Okay.
And so this is really what, if you were to ask me, what am I looking at in Nevada and Arizona? Did young Latinos turn out? And right now, they've been lagging in both states. So what we want and what we hope for the Democrats and the progressive space is for the young Latinos to have actually made their turnout rate at the same level in 2018. Because if it's closer to 2014, there's no pathway.
All right, let's talk about the blame game here. It seems like Trump is getting a lion's share of it. But it's pretty interesting to me to see a bunch of Republican senators saying, hey, let's slow your roll, Mitch McConnell. Obviously, people are throwing at McCarthy. I mean, it does feel like there's a questioning of the entire sort of, if you look at the team of leaders being Trump, McConnell, and McCarthy, that they're all in for some questioning.
Who among the Republican leadership looks good? Who looks like they delivered what they promised they were going to deliver? None of them.
Doug Ducey? David RGA? I don't know. Like, that might be it.
Yeah. Kemp,
Brian Kemp? Right.
So, this is a moment for every member of Congress in the House and Senate with a grievance against their leadership to have a chance maybe to take a shot. Maybe not replace them. I mean, I guess I think Mitch McConnell's a pretty savvy Paul. But, these are times when Republicans are really not only not as good an election as they expected, a bad election, an election in which they may defy historic terms in terms of how terribly they did.
Matt, you tell me Rick Scott, Ron Johnson, and Mike Lee are anti-McConnell. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Marco Rubio he's in line to be chair of Intel if somehow Republicans have, and you don't get that slot in Intel unless Mitch McConnell likes you. So he loves being the ranking on Intel. So this tells me, wow, this is really deeper than just the usual suspects.
I was really surprised when I saw that. And I think I just have this feeling that it feels like 1998 again, where that midterm you underperform expectations and the leader gets the brunt, even though you might have gained seats, right? Newt was gone by December. They went through two speakers or speakers to be then. Is this the future of the House? Remember, don't forget Mr. Livingston, I presume. That's a great day, one day or two for Speaker Livingston. No, but I will say this, though. I think McConnell, unlike some of the other folks, did set up that flare in August, being like candidate quality is an issue. So I think he at least did a pretty good job of saying, if we don't slow our roll, we could be in a bad situation.
Hey, Maria Teresa, what about Democratic leadership? There seems to be the patience is running out on the octogenarian leadership in Congress, isn't it?
Well, and you already have Catherine Clark basically saying that she's interested, and you have Pramila as well saying that she's interested for the top dog leadership, and then you have Hakeem Jeffries. And so it's going to be interesting what part of the party. And the fact that, if you recall, everybody was saying that the Democrats were going too woke. Well, if the fact that you had record turnout among young voters, which is going to be the largest base of the Democratic Party come 2024.
Be careful on the record turnout of young voters. It depends on where you look.
Yes, it does.
Didn't show up in some places.
But Pennsylvania, in Georgia, I mean, places where there was a lot of.
But not New York, not California,
and I think that's right.
And that's why they may be short in the House.
Right. No, but I think part of it is because that's where the investments were in Pennsylvania and in Georgia. You didn't see it as much in Arizona and Nevada. And I think that's going to bear the results. But if you actually identify who is closer to that new base, and it is Pramila. So it's going to be, I think, a much closer fight than folks actually understand.
Maybe, although there was some expectation if the Democratic caucus contracted significantly, it was going to be a much more progressive group of people, because the people who are going to be washed away would be the moderates in swing districts. But a lot of them survived.
Yeah, they're here. The moderates may be there. And not only that, look at some of these Republican seats they won, right? You're going to have a Democrat who's going to want to be moderate in Alaska. You're going to have a Democrat in Washington 3, right? Like, this is going to be a fascinating dynamic.
In North Carolina and Ohio, even though they were very tight races, the Dems all held on. So, I mean, that's true.
And taking a little lesson from the Republicans, they always want somebody from the Freedom Caucus or from the right at the seat of the table in leadership. Does that happen in the Democrats?
Well, is there a ticket? Yeah. Do you create a ticket, right? Like, we've seen the House Republicans uncomfortably so, but they created one a little bit. Is there one that you would expect, like a Jayapal and
a Clark,
Clark being able to say, hey, why don't we do this together?
I see that pathway. I mean, when you saw a lot of the negotiation that was happening around the President Biden's infrastructure bill, Pramila was one of the first people that he would always call, and it wasn't by accident. It was his way to tone down the rest of the more progressives, the AOC voices, and so on and so forth. So I do see that, Chuck, as a possibility.
I don't want to get bogged down in a lame duck agenda conversation, but I want to bring up the student loan situation. It seems to me, and there's all sorts of ways the lame duck could go. If the Democrats are going to know they have the Senate going forward, then they're okay not doing judges, and they'll do that later, right? Well, I understand that. Do you think Democrats should codify the student loan thing in this lame duck?
I think they're going to need to.
I'm going to bring up the exit poll, just so you know. Yeah. A majority approved of this student loan cancellation in the exit poll on that front. And let me just show you the numbers by age. This won't shock you. 75% of voters under 30 supported this, but so did 56% of voters between the ages of 30 and 44. So it was Gen Z and millennials. I mean, here are the numbers. It goes upside down once you get essentially to my generation.
Well, part of it, one of the reasons that millennials haven't been able to buy their first home was because they've been strapped with student loans. And this is also another fun fact. When I worked on the Hill, the only loan that you could not declare bankruptcy was your student loan. Everything else can be forgiven, and you could file Chapter 11. And so because you didn't have young people at the table, then they weren't able to actually negotiate for themselves.
I think it's going to be difficult to do in the lame duck, but I think politically Democrats have to make the attempt. Don't you think, Susan?
Yeah. And actually the bet on the student loan forgiveness worked out for Democrats. Turned out
that's, I think, the argument some are going to make.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's
and not everybody thought it would be.
That's a fair point. All right, Susan, Maria, Matt, good to see you all. Happy election week. We'll see you next week for the rest of the results. Up next, meet a new House member who won a seat that Republicans thought they could make competitive this year. It was Congressman-elect Seth Magaziner. He'll join me next. But first, another moment honoring the sacrifice and service of America's veterans. The Vice President, the Second Gentleman, and the First Lady laid a wreath this morning at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington National Cemetery. President Biden was not there because he is overseas right now. And we're going to have more on his trip next. You're watching Meet the President now. Welcome back. Ahead of Election Day, we singled out some specific districts to watch as early benchmarks for both parties. One of those districts was Rhode Island's 2nd District, which includes half of the state, parts of the city of Providence. Republicans were hopeful that a good night would put a whole host of Democratic-held districts in play, including that one. Party-backed Alan Fung, former mayor of Cranston, state's 2nd largest city. It's where Republicans have been able to successfully launch candidacies before from that area. But Fung fell short on Tuesday night, losing to former Rhode Island State Treasurer Seth Magaziner. Well, the new Congressman-elect from Rhode Island's 2nd District, Seth Magaziner, joins me now. Congressman-elect, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let me ask you this. Was your race as competitive as Republicans thought it was?
It was. Well, let me just start on this Veterans Day by recognizing and thanking all of those who have served our country in uniform and their families. It was a competitive race, but we were successful because on the issues that matter most to people here in our district, protecting Social Security and Medicare, lowering health care costs, tackling energy costs, people trusted the Democratic side to be serious on tackling those issues more than the Republican side, and we were able to prevail.
What was interesting is he was running on mostly economic issues. Is that fair to say? It felt like your race seemed to be less about other issues, really almost all economy, different ways to slice it. You want to talk inflation, Social Security. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think that as candidates, we do best when we listen to the voters in our district, right? And instead of necessarily listening to the talking points coming out of Washington. And here in our district in Rhode Island, there's a couple of features that were important for us. We're an older district demographically, so Social Security and Medicare matter a lot to people in our district. Also, lowering prescription drug prices matters a lot to people in the 2nd Congressional District. The other thing is that we're a blue-collar district where organized labor is very strong. And so, you know, when both parties are trying to make the argument that they're best on the economy and they're best for workers, having people hear from men and women in their own union halls that the Democratic agenda is the one that's really the best for working people goes a long way. That's a lot better than hearing somebody on TV say it who you don't know. And so, you know, I think those are the factors that allowed us to be successful here. We had the credibility with working people, particularly through organized labor, and also with the seniors in our district. We really knew that we had to focus on lowering drug prices, on Social Security and Medicare, because those are issues that matter to our voters.
You know, it's interesting. I remember on Election Day 2020 seeing the former President Trump did okay in the 2nd District. He didn't win it, but he did have some following. Is that blue-collar vote that Democrats, that we've seen that he's sort of peeled away at times from Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, this is a district that in 2016, Hillary Clinton only got about 50% of the vote in. President Biden did a little bit better. He was at 55, 56%. So we knew it was going to be a competitive race going in, and you know, the type of race that in a normal midterm year would be one that the party out of power might be able to flip. But we really stayed focused on the economy. We stayed focused on listening to our voters, and that allowed us to be successful.
Look, you're a new guy here, so and yet your vote for leadership matters just as much as Steny Hoyer's vote for leadership, if you will. What would you like to see the Democratic leadership look like come 2023?
Well, if Speaker Pelosi decides to stand again, she would have my support. I think that the Democrats are coming off of a very successful legislative year, passing the infrastructure bill, passing the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the PACT Act, and it's hard to argue with that track record. You know, if the Speaker decides to stand again, she'll have my support. If she decides that it's time for her to do other things, then I'll look forward to meeting the other members of the caucus and making my decision once I've had a chance to have real conversations with them. And
if you had a few minutes with President Biden and he's asking you, he says, Congressman, tell me what I need to know. Tell me what you heard on the ground that maybe you don't think I'm hearing enough of in the White House to, you know, make sure I'm hearing some of the concerns that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the things that are obvious, right? So we made progress on tackling drug prices with the Inflation Reduction Act, but there's a lot more that we could do there, particularly for people who aren't on Medicare. And so that's something that I think we ought to prioritize. I think it's those kitchen table issues. One issue that really resonated here in Rhode Island is, you know, people are frustrated with gas prices and they see the oil companies making billions of dollars of profits, and they realize that that's not fair and something needs to be done about that. And of course, protecting abortion rights as well. So, you know, it's not rocket science. Like, listen to the people and focus on those kitchen table issues. And that's not just the right thing to do politically. It's the right thing to do morally for those who put us in positions of power.
Look, the House is not a place where bipartisanship happens easily just because of the way the rules work, majority rules. But it does seem the voters really want it. How do you respond to that?
Absolutely. The voters expect us to try to find common ground and work together. And we always have to remember we have more in common with each other as Americans than we have opposed. And, you know, particularly when I see what's happening on the Republican side since the election, you know, what I would suggest to them is Democrats outperformed in this election because the voters felt that the Republican Party in Washington was becoming too extreme. So for some Republicans to say that their response to this is going to be to double down on extremism and go even further to the extreme is crazy. I mean, you know, selfishly, if they want Democrats to win 50 seats in the next election, I guess they could go in that direction. But I don't think it's the right thing for the country, and you know, it's not good politics for them either, I think, in the long run.
All right, Congressman-elect Seth Magaziner, who's from the 2nd Congressional District of Rhode Island. Good to see you. Thanks for coming on, and good luck.
Appreciate it.
All right. After the break, Russia in retreat. Ukrainian forces advanced into a key city previously under Russian control. I'm going to speak with the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, Admiral James Stavridis. He'll be here next on this Veterans Day. You're watching Meet the Press Now. At the upcoming G20 meeting, President Biden is expected to urge European allies to continue their support of Ukraine in this war. It comes as Ukrainian forces are now reclaiming a key city from Russian forces. Troops have entered the southern city of Kherson. President Zelensky calls this an historic day. Russia's withdrawal is a major setback for Putin from a military and political standpoint. He declared the region annexed just weeks ago, if you recall. Joining me now, retired Admiral James Stavridis. He's a former Supreme Allied Commander at NATO and, of course, an NBC News analyst. Jim, it's good to see you. First of all, before we talk about Ukraine, I want to talk about Veterans Day. I was heartened. There was a great program that was designed to get veterans to be poll workers. And considering how well this election was run, I'd like to think veterans did their duty there. But I'd love for you to say a few words.
Just to remind all in the nation that we celebrate this day. We say Happy Veterans Day. We'd never say Happy Memorial Day, which is about those who have fallen. This is about those who have donned the cloth of the nation, gone to war, returned safely, occasionally with serious wounds. But we had to celebrate today. So thanks for saying that, Chuck. It means the world to me.
Look, I'd also like people to know the history of why it's on November 11th, and people need to learn their history of World War I to understand the problems we are facing today around the globe. So let me talk about Ukraine here. There's a real debate inside the administration over when should diplomacy begin? When should Ukraine begin to say we're ready to go to the table? President Biden was quoted as saying, until Putin's out of Ukraine, there are no talks. What do you sense is happening?
I think that's as delightful a theory as that is. I think it's unrealistic. I think the time is now to start setting the groundwork for a conversation. And you know this well, Chuck. We've already seen Ukraine and Russia come together at the table and hammer out a grain agreement, very important one to the developing world, under the auspices of Turkish President Erdogan, with the Secretary General of the United Nations involved. So it's never too early. What we ought to be thinking about is when could this happen? I would postulate we're going to have to go through the winter. Putin wants to turn over the last card he's got, which is, will the Europeans crack in the face of energy prices? Answer, my view, no. And I think Zelensky knows he is going to have to start making some move toward negotiation simply because of resources, cost from the West. So there are two competing forces here. Chuck, I'd say after the winter is going to be time to really talk.
That's interesting that you say it that way, because that's my question. I hear you that the Europeans aren't going to crack, but the European public may crack, right?
I think that it's certainly a deep worry on the minds of the governments in Europe, and they're doing the smart things. They're stockpiling natural gas. They're providing subsidies to buffer the cost. Look, Granny is not going to freeze to death in the attic in Dusseldorf. The Europeans are smart. They'll work through this. They'll turn the thermostats down. As Chancellor Scholz said, we get this right this winter, or every winter we bend our knee to Vladimir Putin. I'm going with door number one. I think the Europeans will as well.
Hey, I'm just curious, since President Biden came out politically a lot stronger than folks expected from these midterms, does that change the calculus with Saudi Arabia? Does that change the calculus with Xi?
I think it's a smart question. I would say what we have with Saudi Arabia is a series of tactical disagreements that this probably helps. With President Xi, we have a strategic calculus to make. I think it helps him quite well. President Biden, don't forget, President Xi had a big couple of weeks as well at the 20th Party Congress. So here you have two leaders kind of both on top of their game. And I'm hoping one thing they're talking about sotto voce, quietly, off the books at Bali at the G20 is Putin. And I think that President Xi could be very influential in pushing Putin toward the negotiating table.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Xi is, I feel like he gets closer and closer to saying enough of this.
Yeah. Wouldn't you, if you were in his position? His number one thing is the economy. He needs to, frankly, get out of this zero COVID policy.
Which he's starting to do. And I have to tell you, the conspiracy theorists in me said, well, right after the midterms, you're doing this. That's interesting.
It is indeed. And so he's got to get that economy moving. And Vladimir is sitting on top of the international economy like a weight. I think Xi is going to be in the mood to start pushing him again. I think it's probably an after the winter proposition, but it's coming.
All right. Admiral James Stavridis, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here, of course. And, you know, we will see you soon.
Happy Veterans Day, Chuck.
Well, as we mentioned, there are Veterans Day ceremonies all across the country, and they're fantastic today. Throughout the nation's capital, we've seen a lot of events honoring all those who have served in America's military. Right here in Washington, D.C., the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and other officials spoke at the 40th anniversary of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which, if you've never had a chance to see and spend time with, when you do it, you'll never forget it. It bears the names of more than 58,000 Americans who died in that war. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As control of Congress hangs in the balance, one of the closest races in the country we're watching also involves a former member of Congress. It's Karen Bass. California Democrat trails Rick Caruso in the race for mayor of Los Angeles. Keep in mind, just 55% of the vote has been counted. Bass trails by about 2,700 votes. There are more than 450,000 ballots still need to be counted. So with me now, Melanie Mason, the national political reporter for the Los Angeles Times, who's had her finger on the pulse of this race. So, Melanie, it does seem as if there's a pattern here to this vote count as it's been coming in. And what do we have left to get in? Is this as organized as we know? We're getting close to Election Day vote here?
Actually, I think that we're now going through mostly mail vote. I mean, we've kind of gotten through most of the Election Day vote, which is why we have Rick Caruso out in the lead. But as we see Karen Bass cutting into that lead, those are your mail votes, and that's really more of your Democratic core voters. And so I think that as we start seeing more mail votes reported, the question is she was kind of picking up these votes at a 60-40 clip yesterday, and if she keeps that up, will she overtake Caruso? It looks like there's a pretty good chance that she could. But of course, you know, we have seen that these ballot counts can be wonky. So I think no predictions is probably the safest way to go right now.
Look, it's going to be 51-49, 50.5, whatever it is. But wow, what a divide in this city. Melanie, tell me about the divides. Are they as obvious as I think they are, that it was African Americans and maybe urban whites versus the Valley, Latinos and Asians?
There's certainly geographic components to this. There's certainly ethnic components to this. But I also think there are sort of ideological components as well, which is interesting for a Los Angeles city race because this is a very Democratic city. And yes, we have two Democrats on the ticket, but Rick Caruso used to be a Republican. He changed his registration first to no party preference and then to Democrat just before he got into the race. And I think that that was sort of a subcurrent all throughout this race was you had Karen Bass, who had the entire Democratic establishment lining up behind her, versus Rick Caruso, who sort of said, look, I don't come from the Democratic establishment. And that's a good thing because people in the city are frustrated with how things are going under Democratic leadership. And so what's fascinated me about this race is that you have a very Democratic city sort of wrestling with what kind of Democrat they think they are. And I think that this race is really going to be a referendum on that. Governor Gavin Newsom, did he have a good election night or not, Melanie? Oh, it's a great question. I think that, look, he won re-election, so he had a good
How much money is he sitting on, though? And how much of that lack of Democratic turnout is frustrating, say, Katie Porter?
Yes, I think that that's a very great question. Now, he did campaign with Congressman Katie Porter at the very end of this race, but sure, if you've got tens of millions of dollars in the bank afterwards and a lot of speculation about what your national ambitions are, I do wonder if we're getting into these very, very narrow races. Of course, we have to see them all shake out. If it looks like Democrats get over the finish line, then the recriminations may not be flying fast and furious. But if somebody like a Congresswoman Katie Porter doesn't ends up losing this race by a very slim margin, then I think that is very likely for the leader of the Democratic Party here in California to have to answer some of those questions. You know, he made pretty prominent criticism of the Democratic messaging nationally. How does that criticism look today? Well, in some ways, I think it actually looks pretty prescient, right? Because I think that he did see nationally that there was tapping into this frustration, anger, energy among the Democratic base about the abortion issue. And so when he came out, first when the Dobbs opinion was leaked in May, and then when the decision was official in June, I think he tapped into what was a lot of frustration among the Democratic base, that they felt like Democrats weren't fighting hard enough. And so in that sense, I do think that he has tapped a lot into the national Democratic mood, which wanted a more assertive Democratic Party to push back against some of the Republican extremism that they saw. In California, it's, I think, a little bit more nuanced because, of course, California doesn't have the same sort of issues around abortion rights. We did have Proposition 1 on the ballot, which enshrined the right to abortion in the state constitution. But, the right to abortion was actually kind of already in the state constitution. This just kind of like double made it sure. And so I think that just goes to show this is not like the state of Michigan, for example, where the initiative that passed really did make a difference about abortion access in that state.
All right, keep it under 5 words. Lonnie Chen, is he going to win or lose?
I think that being a Republican is still really hard statewide.
And that's what we found out. All right. Melanie Mason, we're still waiting for a lot of vote count, but it's good to talk with you and good to get your insight. Thank you. Thank you all for being with us this hour.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.